My name is Antonio Green. I'm a fourth generation funeral director just across the bridge here in Detroit at James H. Cole Home for Funerals. My great grandfather started the business in 1919, so we're over 100 years old. I'm the fourth generation of the firm, joined by my brother and my mom. The three of us are the family that run the business. But as you can see in the picture here, this is our supporting staff. So this picture here represents people from millennials, Gen Zers, all the way up to the silent generation, so even older than baby boomers. We actually have a staffer that works for us that's going on her 62nd year with us. So being able to have that longevity with the firm is something that we are truly blessed to have. And it's a life lesson in what led me to writing the book, Talk to Me, Understanding the Millennial Mindset. Being able to understand and work with the different generations, from silent generation, those born probably 30 or 40 years before I was even born, down to those who are now probably, 15, 20 years younger than I am. So being able to bridge those gaps between the different generations is one thing that I've really had firsthand experience with. So if you take a look at this picture, about 40% of the people in this picture worked for our firm before I technically was full-time working. So these are people who saw me grow up from knee-high to a pipsqueak, growing on up through the generation and through the years. So they looked at me as this little kid getting on their nerves and then putting me in my place, and somebody who went to school and now joining the firm in 2007 when I got licensed and started working full time. And I was young and I had all these vibrant ideas I wanted to change, and they're looking at me like, well, who are you? Why don't you go sit back down? We're used to you running around here and getting in our way, and you're getting in our way now, so please go sit down. So I learned very quickly that even though I was technically, quote unquote, the boss, that I didn't have the respect, especially of the older generation, because I had not put my dues in. So the next few years, that's just what I did. They saw me working 6 days a week, 10, 11, 12 hours every day. And pretty soon, they began to understand that, oh, he's in it just like we are. He's vested like we are. He's dedicated just like we are. So then when I started to bring some of those newer ideas or wanting to change things, it wasn't an immediate no, get out the way. It was more of an openness. It's like, okay, well, let's hear what you have to say. So this here is a model of how most businesses are set up. Most larger businesses, corporations, you're going to have the head, the CEO, or an owner. You're going to have an HR department, you're going to have middle-level management, and then you're going to have your labor force and those workers that are doing the day-to-day operations. This here is how your average funeral home is set up. You're going to have grandma or grandpa who's still in there that's quote-unquote running the business. You'll have a hodgepodge of cousins, aunts, uncles, that's middle-level management that might be running. You've got younger people coming up that want to run the company. There's no clear delineation of who's really running this thing or who do I report to if you're coming in as a younger or a new staffer. Now, this is one thing that you have to realize, because when you're hiring new people, especially in the younger generation, you're bringing in those interns into the company, they want to see a clear line of succession or delineation or a chain of command. They want to know, where do I go if I have an issue? Or if I want to grow in the company, what level can I grow to? When you're dealing with a situation like this, they'd have no clue, and it's frustrating. They don't know which way to go. They don't know who to go to. They're just going to trust the person that they think they should trust. And that's going to deter them from truly growing with your firm. So with a structure like that, how is it that we don't kill each other? How is it that we can keep the business thriving and growing and using our core people to help us do that. We know hiring and rehiring is expensive, it takes time, and it's not something we want to continue to do. So we need to learn what the best ways are to keep those A players that are working for our company. So envision a workplace where generations can work together. Everybody feels heard, everybody feels like their opinion matters, and that the work that they do is making a difference, not only for the customers, but also for the business. People have pride in their work. They want to see that what they're doing is growing the business, so they have a place to stick around to and grow with it. You'll be able to learn how staff will feel enhanced with efficiency. They'll have a meaningful collaboration between the generations, not just at face value, but being able to truly work with each other, no matter if they're older or younger, and having real takeaways. And then morale, increased morale in the workplace. You're going to have people that want to be there, that want to be able to work for a cause. They are working for something more than just a paycheck. And how does that result on the business side? Higher staff retention, like we said, that less turnover in staff, less rehiring, more purposeful innovation. And by that I mean you're growing, you're innovating with the company. If a business is not changing and not growing, it's slowly dying. So you have to keep innovating, you have to keep changing with the times. Even our industry, which is traditionally very slow to adapt to the times, you still have to find ways to innovate and adapt and increase market share. All of those things are going to lead to having more revenue, more cases, and a better company overall. So today's takeaways, what I want you guys to truly understand is the differences between the generations. There are differences, and why do those differences exist? And recognizing where those gaps are so that you're going to be able to identify them before they become an issue in your company. And also we'll learn how to implement paths and bridges to close those gaps so you can work with generations no matter what the age. So understanding the generational differences or the ages. So first, right now in the working world, you're most likely going to start off with your boomers. Is going to be the older, more seasoned people that are running the firm. So baby boomers were born late 40s right up until the early to mid 60s. Gen Xers are going to pick up from there from mid 60s right up to 1980. And then the millennials pick up right around early 80s, and they'll carry you right up to the late 90s. And then our newcomers, Gen Zers, are those born in the late 90s, right around 2000, up until 2010. So the Gen Zers, those are those new interns that you have coming into the jobs now. So just as a show of hands, who do we have here? Boomers, raise your hands. Okay, what about Gen Xers? Okay, all right, millennials, where my millennials? All right. And any Gen Zers? I think I saw a couple. Okay, very good. We got some in here. All right, all right. We'll be nice on you guys. We'll be nice on you. So in my book, I specifically break down the millennial generation. So whenever I've come to conferences over the last few years like this, trade shows, I always hear, oh, those millennials, I can't work with them. I don't know what to do with them. You guys are just so different. You don't want to work. So I hear all these things about millennials. So in the book, I broke down, just like Manel just said, the two different types of the millennial generation. So you have X-millennials, which were those born from early 80s right up till 88, 89, so almost 90. Those millennials are going to bear more of a closer resemblance to Gen Xers. We were the ones that grew up with the old school mentality of doing things. When we went to the library in school, we were still using the Dewey Decimal System to find and check out our library books. Ask a social millennial, which is those born after that in the latter part of the 90s, or a Gen Zer, ask them how to spell Dewey Decimal right now. They wouldn't know what you're talking about. Now, the ex-millennials, we also had more of that hard grit mentality similar to Gen Xers. We got in there, we did the hard work, we weren't afraid to use our hands, and we did not grow up early on with the internet or with a lot of technology. Our technology was the square Nintendo little handheld gamepad. That's the technology we had. But coming up, so as we started entering into middle school and into high school, we had to adapt to technology. All of a sudden, we had dial-up internet. It took you 10 minutes to get online to search a website, but hey, we were getting there. And as we started coming through high school and into college, technology and the internet really took hold of our lives. So we had to constantly adapt to that changing technological world. Now, social millennials, so those born after 1990 up to the late 90s, they were always grew up with something in their hand or some type of connectedness to their friends. So if we remember the early days of AOL Instant Messenger, those types of early forms of communication, they had access to. So no longer did they have to get on the phone, the house phone or the landline phone. They're on the phone with their friends, and their parents get on and say, hey, get off the phone, I got to make a phone call. They didn't have to deal with that because they had that connectedness through the internet or through handheld devices like phones or internet things like sidekicks that always had that, or the pagers or the, I can't remember what they were called, the little, slipped my mind. Yes. So the little messengers that we used to have back in the day, yep. But social millennials, that they have the advantage of having that adaptability of being on technology. So if you have like a social millennial, which is that younger millennial in your workforce, they're going to be able to show you how to adapt the firm. How can we start using technology? So we're not just bashing on this group, they have the benefits as well. But it's important to know who you're working with in your firm. Are you working with an ex-millennial or are you working with a social millennial? And we'll show you later how you're able to actually adapt your way of thinking and your approach to that group. So the strengths of our more seasoned generation, baby boomers and Gen Xers, they know, they've been there, they've done that, they wrote the book on it. They can identify problems before it's a problem. They know how to provide an invaluable real-life understanding and experience. They've gone through things that you couldn't even imagine right now. So being able to appreciate that, for one, do not take it for advantage, appreciate that knowledge, ask questions, and be able to be open. I know one thing with the younger generation and millennials we get a bad rep for is not listening. So all my millennials in the room, whether you're older or younger millennial, listening is key, and appreciating and taking on that knowledge of the older generation. They're going to save you time. They're going to save you a lot of headache if you just listen to them and heed some of their words of advice. Now, millennials, Gen Zers, the younger generation, we're innovators. We want to change. We want the business to improve and grow to today's standards. So for Gen Xers and baby boomers, listening to the younger generation, and don't just push them to the side and say you don't know what you're talking about. Actually heed their advice on things that are going on in every other industry in the world, and how we can appreciate that and adapt that to the death care industry to make our business more efficient and serve our customers even better. And on top of that is using their knowledge of technology. So if you don't understand something, don't just disregard or push to the side. Use them. If you don't want to create a social media, if you don't want to hire a social media company, use somebody on your team that's probably right now on their phone on social media. Let them help break you into creating social media or using that for the advantage of your firm. or checking, if you have a Facebook page, but you never check your inbox on Facebook. In case you didn't know, customers out there are messaging you on Facebook, and they're expecting you, if you have a page, they're expecting you to respond to it. So if that's not in your wheelhouse, but you do have a Facebook page, then have one of those younger people on the staff do just that. So how do we build the bridge? First, we'll start off by analyzing, evaluating where the issues are that exist in your business. It could be something very simple. If you've got a smaller firm and you only have 5 or 6 employees, being able to identify those issues with the 1 or 2 who are working that might be younger than you might be a little easier. If you have a larger firm, then it's going to be a little more difficult because you're going to have multi-generations of youngers. So you're going to have those Gen Zers, you're going to have older millennials, younger millennials, so you're going to have more of a task, and you need to be able to identify who you're working with. And then strategize, formulate a plan of how we're going to go about motivating this younger generation, how we're going to go about making them feel heard and welcome, and get them to truly grow and excel in the business, and implementing our ideas. So coming up with the strategy and implementing it, and don't give up on it, being able to consistently keep going and keep things changing within the business is key. So let's go off a little practice here. Baby boomers, if you remember the floor model TVs. Now, this is a little disrespectful. This payphone is older than baby boomers, so I apologize about that. But yes, for those younger, that used to be a payphone where people had to go to a phone, a landline phone, to make a phone call and put money in it to make a phone call. And fax machines, these are all types of things that boomers grew up with. But now, you're involved with technology. Probably everybody in here is using email on their phone. Everybody, a lot of boomers are going to be on social media. So the ability to adapt and change is there. You can't tell me I'm not going to change, I'm not going to adapt, because you're already doing it and you've done it. Gen Xers, same thing. The old big block phones, pagers, old school gaming systems, what you grew up with. And now you're using all sorts of media. You're on social media, you're using all sorts of technology, smart technology within the homes. So again, Gen Xers have adapted as well. So if I can get all my Gen Xers and baby boomers to stand up. Gen Xers and baby boomers, everybody stand up. Okay. Baby boomers, you guys sit down. Baby boomers, sit down. Sit down. No, I'm sorry. Baby boomers, you stand up. Xers, you sit down. No, I'm sorry. Xers, you stand back out. You stand. All right, I'm sorry. All right, everybody sit down. Sit down. Now, unless you're Catholic like I am, some of you might be a little frustrated with that. But I use that as an example. So I use that to make you feel, imagine how the younger generation feel that's working for you. You were doing just like I asked. You stood up, you sat down, you stood up, you sat down, with no clear direction on where I was going with it. That's how the younger generation feels. They feel they're doing exactly what they're asked for. They're lockstep, they're following you, whatever I need to do. Yes, ma'am, I'm doing that, with no clear vision of where they're going. And it gets frustrating when they get in trouble or they're yelled at or reprimanded for something and they say, hey, I'm just doing what you told me to do. So being able to provide a vision and a clear understanding of where you want to take your company, what goals does the company have, and bringing that younger generation along with you is going to help them grow with you and encourage them, because they're going to feel a part of the plan and a part of the team. Millennials, so we grew up with the big monitor. When you had a computer at home, you had that big monitor sitting on your desk, flip phones, early form of the iPad. And then now we're using, of course, everything. Millennials are spearheading the technology these days. So your social media platforms, AI, millennials are at the forefront of that and are spearheading the technological development. And Gen Zers have always been connected. Literally since a baby, they've had some kind of device in their hand. So this is going to be why communication, you're going to have to understand how you're going to have to change your communication patterns on how do I speak to a Gen Z or how do I speak to a younger millennial? Because they've always had a phone in their hand. They've always communicated by text. Rarely do they pick up the phone, which is why some of us are frustrated with the communication issues that are sometimes lacking with the younger generation because they haven't had to have that. They've just been texting on their phone, and that was their form of communication. I've had experience where I've called one of my staffers, they didn't answer, went to voicemail, left them a voicemail, and I sent them a text, and 2 seconds later they text back. Like, the phone's sitting right there, why didn't you just answer it? But that's not how they think, that's not how they operate. They would much rather just send a text right back, and that's how we're gonna deal with it. Even if it takes 10 minutes longer to text back and forth, this could have been a 60-second conversation, but that's not where their comfortability is, and that's where their mindset is. So sometimes it's all about meeting them where they're at, not just dragging them where we want them to be. So, millennials and Gen Zers. Let's have you guys stand up this time. Millennials and Gen Zers. All right. So, for you guys, if you were to have, and I might need the mic on this one for the crowd, what is one thing, and you can raise your hand, if you can say one thing that frustrates you most about working with an older generation? It's a safe room. It's a safe space. It's a safe space. One thing.
I'd like to hear this young lady's answer right here.
Okay.
I think a lot of stuff just takes a really long time to get to, where our generation is a little bit quicker.
Fast pace. So think about being more fast-paced. Now I'll tell you this: the older generation is looking at you guys as moving too fast. You're not detailed enough. In this profession, you need to slow down and make sure you get it right. So the flip side is you can do both. You can be able to be productive and move at a quicker than usual pace and still have checks and balances in place to make sure that those needs are met and that all the I's are dotted and T's are being crossed. Anybody else? You got another one? Yeah, did you have one? I feel it. I feel you got something. Mm-hmm.
We're not that far apart, so to be honest. I totally say in the past was the response of, this is how we've always done it.
Mm-hmm.
So having more of a closed-minded as opposed to an open-minded approach.
Yeah, so being open, and that goes from, okay, everybody can sit down, thank you. But I just want you guys to see both sides of it. Being open-minded works both ways. You have to be open-minded to seeing the advantages of doing things the old school ways. They've worked for 60, 70, 80 years for this company. We don't want to change it. Where on the opposite side, yes, it's worked that long, but there are ways we can do better and do it a little bit more efficient because there are newer technologies and newer ways of doing things, newer understanding nowadays. So having open-minded goes on both sides. Strategy. So how do we strategize to start building these bridges? Gen Zers realize that they only know the smart world. Just like I said a few minutes ago, they've always grew up with something in their hand, with a phone in their hand or a piece of technology in their hand. That's what they're used to. So as a firm, you may have to bring in some technology. You may have to bring in an iPad. You may have to start using apps. So if they're making arrangements, this is what they're going to feel comfortable with. They don't want to go to pen and paper. You have to bring things in that are going to make them work to their level because that technology piece is what they grew up on. And millennials, now we can bridge that gap. So if you have a millennial on your team, especially an older millennial, they're going to be able to know both worlds, the technology-driven side and the old school way. So if you're just too frustrated to deal with that Gen Z on your team, use somebody like that. Use an older millennial to help bridge that gap and bring that understanding of what you want to relay to the younger generation. Don't pull your hair out trying to figure it out. Use the people that are on your team. And Gen Xers, now Gen Xers have been through the digital revolution, social change. So your Gen Xers are going to be fluid. They're not going to care. They're say, hey, I can figure it out, period. Just give me an end cause. Let me know how this is helping and I'll figure it out. And then boomers might be more resistant to change, but just have in mind that change has to happen. Your business has changed throughout the years, but you maybe haven't seen it because you've been in it, you've been running it, but you have evolved with time, so you have to continue to do so and don't stand in the way or block that innovation. And understanding the roles. So your baby boomers, that's your wisdom. Like I said earlier, for the younger generations, before, if you have a senior embalmer or a senior funeral director or somebody that's been working at the cemetery for 30 and 40 years, knows everything front and back, do not let that person retire or walk out the door without soaking up as much knowledge as you can from that person. I don't care if you've got to sit down with them every now and again and just have conversations, take notes, but you do not let that knowledge walk out the door. And they want to share their wisdom with you, but a lot of times they feel that you're not going to appreciate it, so I'm not going to waste my time. You're not going to listen to me, so I'm not going to waste my time and energy by showing you what I've done. But just having a little bit of an open mind and just cracking that door for them is going to help tremendously on pulling that knowledge out of them. Like I said, they want a legacy to leave. They want to pass that wisdom along. You just have to be accepting and listen to them. And Gen Xers, being a bridge builder yourself by being able to be fluid between the baby boomers and millennials and even Gen Zers, being able to help bridge those gaps and help the boomers understand, hey, you know, the younger staff, they really do want to learn. They really do want to help this business. Just give them a chance. And going to the younger generation and showing them, hey, this guy's been doing it longer than you've been along. This lady's been running this firm since you've been a baby. You need to listen to them. So being that bridge builder for Gen Xers. And millennials, like I said, we're tech drivers. We have to understand where technology fits in with this industry and maybe where it doesn't. So we're always so quick to incorporate technology, but we have to almost sit back and take a vision of, okay, this is where things are going. We're not there yet. Maybe we can build towards that, but maybe we should slow down on implementing the change or bringing in this piece of technology. And Gen Zers is just being open-minded to everything and not being afraid to step up and share what you've learned. Share the new things that you've learned in school that maybe some of us have been out of school for over 20 years, don't know anything about. So sharing that newness and providing that new blood to the firm is very important. And then implementation. So how do we do this? And the Bible in Matthew chapter 5, there was a scripture about Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And in the scripture, he tells the story about a lamp. He says you don't light a lamp and hide it under a bowl. You light it and hang it on a lampstand for its light to shine to everybody. This is the newness. These are the new generation, the apprentices that are coming into our business. We don't just bring them in to stick them in the prep room or just put some paperwork behind them. We bring them in because they're the future of our business. So being able to pour into them and doing what you have to do to help them grow and to help their light shine on the community that we serve. We can't lose sight of the importance of that younger generation. So how do we truly help them? Now, this is a strategy that works, but it's not easy. So having one-on-one sit-down meetings with literally everybody on your staff. And I'm not talking about just sitting in the break room, just talking about random stuff. I'm talking about learning who you have on your staff, learning their likes, learning their dislikes, learning how they react in certain ways, what hobbies do they have. What this is going to do, it's going to provide you insight into how to really tap into that person. If you've got somebody on your team that likes making charcuterie boards or meat and cheese trays, you can tap into that and say, oh, well, maybe we can incorporate that into our services to our families. If they need something at their luncheon or their repast, they can use your services. I'll give you an example of this. On my staff, we had a gentleman that we hired. He worked in the auto industry for years, about the same age as I am. And he was just a assistant funeral director, greeter, kind of all around working the floor. And I learned that he was a car aficionado. So at the time, we didn't have anybody managing our fleet. Now we have 23 vehicles in our fleet. Something breaks down, something goes wrong, just send it to the dealership. When I learned that he was a car aficionado, I said, oh, well, let's put you ahead of the fleet. Within 4 months, he saved us over $8,000 just in repairs. Because we were, like I said, something goes wrong, just send it to a dealership where he can identify the issue and say, no, we don't need to pay dealership fees on this. We could take it to the muffler man down the street. Or we can take it over to the glass repair shop here or wherever. But he knew, because he knew vehicles, he knew where it had to go. Now, I didn't change the position. He's still doing the same thing. He still is assisting with funerals and visitations. But he actually has more work by heading our fleet, maintaining our fleet, but he's happier because now he gets to do something that he loves at the workplace. So being able to incorporate those types of things, being able to incorporate someone's wants, their desires, their hobbies into the business is going to save you time and money on rehiring someone because they get burned out or move on to a different job, and it's going to make that person so much more happier at the job and more productive. You'll find where employees like this that feel tied to the business, they feel that they are responsible for how the business grows, they're going to internalize that, and they're going to do just that and help your business succeed. And they're going to take it personal when it doesn't happen. When a family comes in upset, they're just not going to pass it off to the owner or the boss and say, oh, you deal with this. They're going to be upset because they're going to realize, where did we drop the ball? So being able to provide or learn your people, learn, like I said, those likes and hobbies, and being able to figure out how do we incorporate that in the business. And then committing. So you have these one-on-one meetings. You learn your staff, you learn their hobbies, you learn what they want. So how do we implement this? Find niches. I mean, it's not going to work for everybody, granted, but being able to hear them out and be able to find places within the business where you can let them fill in or let them help or express those hobbies, or just tell them, hey, you know what? I really see in the future us being able to adapt what you like to the business, or how do we help the business thrive by incorporating, your likes. Let's keep talking about this, but being able to have that commitment to ongoing meetings, and that goes right up to the follow-up. Don't just have the one meeting and learn everything and then you don't do anything. If you're going to do that, then please don't even start this process, because you're just going to frustrate your staff even more. If you're going to be dedicated to having these one-on-one meetings and truly learning your staff, then you have to be able to implement the ideas that they're giving you or show how you're willing to make a change in the business. So you can try it, you're going to get frustrated, you're going to cry about it, and then repeat. Try it again. You have to keep that cycle of you're going to be dedicated to change. We're going to be dedicated to keeping our staff here, keeping those A players. So it's not easy, but you just have to stay dedicated to staying in the cycle of keep trying, keep repeating. Now, for the younger generation, you have to learn that you don't know it all. For my millennials out there, especially the younger millennials, we do get the bad rap of being know-it-alls. We think we know everything. We get a few years of experience, and we could run the whole ship without you. In the Bible, in 1 Kings chapter 12, there was a story about King Solomon's son. So if anybody remembers the Bible history, King Solomon was the richest person that ever lived. Put Jeff Bezos and those guys to shame. I mean, just a multi-trillionaire. His son, after his reign, his son takes over. Now, his son has the choice on how do I rule. King Solomon had these 3 large kingdoms that he was the ruler of. His son comes up, and his father's aides and confidants come to the son and say, you need to continue to rule your people with a soft hand. You need to continue to be generous, and you have to continue your father's legacy. So these would be, like the uncles coming up to him. They probably helped raise him. And they're telling him how his father grew his kingdom. Now, the son goes to his peer group, and his peers tell him, no, you have to rule with a firm hand. You've got to show these people who are boss. You have to be willing to be hard on them. So he decides not to listen to his father's advisors and listen to his peer group. And in a very short time, this massive kingdom that his father established severed and was split in half. So something that his father built and became notorious for being this rich man with all this wealth was gone within one generation. And I know we've heard stories like that within our own industry about somebody who grew their business from the ground up, and the next generation comes along and ruins it. So for my younger millennials, my Gen Zers, always be willing to listen to that older generation and to heed that advice from them. So why does it matter? We all get stuck. Every generation gets stuck in their ways. Even me, I call myself an innovator, but I like regiment. I like things in order. And often I can get comfortable where I'm at. And somebody brings something new and I think, well, do we really have to do that? So being able to get outside of yourself and get stuck, and don't get stuck in change, or don't be afraid of change. Change is the lifeblood of any business, so being able to innovate and be open to change. So what I call identify the idiot, some people call it name the dummy. This is a strategy that I've used that will help you get out of your own way. So what this is, identify the idiot, is anytime a negative thought creeps up in your head, or anytime something like that says, oh, we don't need to do that, or we don't need to change, then you have to name it. So the name for myself is Tony Baloney. So whenever I start thinking of negative thoughts or things that are going to be advantageous to growing the business, I name it. I say, hey, that's not Antonio, that's Tony Baloney. And by doing that, you separate yourself from those thoughts. So you can say, that's not me, that's that person. And feel free to use much abrasive language than that. That's just what I use. But anything it takes to get that point across to yourself that that's not who I am, that's that other person. And you separate that and you can grow away from it and keep moving, keep progressing towards positive change. So, lessons to learn. If you want permanent change, If you want something in your business to change for the good, then you have to be willing to change something permanently. Now, you say, of course, if you're going to make a change, it has to be permanent, but that's easier said than done. Think about all the changes that you would like done in your business, but how many of you are willing to do something different from here on forward? If you want something to truly change, you have to be able to make a decision and sever yourself from things that you did before and create a new path forward. And then also changing your expectations and raising your standards, not of others, but of yourself. Being able to say, hey, in 5 years, this is what I want to accomplish. This is where I want the business to be. It's all about self-reflection. You've got to be able to bring it back home. You are the source of change. If something bothers you in your business, or if one of your staffers, or you got one of those pesky millennials or Gen Zers that are getting on your nerves and you want to point fingers and say they're the problem, take a look in the mirror. Often our biases and the challenge we have with others reflects something within ourselves. So being willing to have that hard conversation with yourself is this person really the issue, or is there something about me that's affecting how I view them? And I'll give you one quick little example of this. This is the first time I shared this, so just kind of bear with me a little bit. So my dad he was a conservation officer in the state of Michigan. And 9 years ago, we had a state trooper come up to the funeral home, and they had this big meeting up in Traverse City. And he was a pilot, private pilot, just like I am. So instead of driving, he decided to fly. So 9 years ago, we get this state trooper comes to the office and says, regret to inform you that your father didn't make it. I'm like, didn't make it? He's at work. His plane crashed on final, and he didn't make it out of the crash. So we, of course, by being a family business, people think you're just supposed to be used to grief. You're supposed to take it on. But, of course, it's a challenging time for us. And not knowing what happened. So by being a pilot, I just, I could recreate the whole situation. I would go on, I brought up the airport he was landing at, brought up the runway, brought up the obstructions that are in place. I need to understand what happened, what made him crash. And after a few months of just going through this, I had to stop myself and say, it happened. And sometimes you can't explain it. Sometimes you can't answer the question why. You can't answer it. So either you're going to keep going over this over and over and over and driving yourself crazy doing this, or you're going to have to learn that some questions can't be answered. And that helped me in the grieving process of moving on. And why I share that story with you is just because sometimes we don't understand why. We don't understand why generations do certain things. We don't understand why our staffers aren't doing what we want them to do. And that's okay. Being able to accept that and say, I don't understand it, but guess what? I'm willing to move forward, and I'm willing to do what I need to do to grow. And growth and change, Nokia. If anybody remembers the old school phones here, Nokia was at the top of their game. They were the #1 producer in the world. In 2007, they had 70% of the market share for cell phones. Does anybody remember what happened in January 2007? Steve Jobs announced the iPhone. And if you can see in this, it's a little small up here, but first quarter, second quarter of 2007 is where you start seeing the decline. And by 2013, Nokia declares bankruptcy. Can you imagine being a multi-billion-dollar company and in less than 5 years you're declaring bankruptcy. Why? Because they chose not to innovate. They chose not to change. They knew the iPhone was coming, but they said, it won't be a big deal, or smartphones are the way of the future, but we have time to adapt. And they were too slow, and they lost their market share and caused their business to go bankrupt. If this happened to them, it can happen to you. You've got to be able to innovate and don't be afraid to change. All right, I'm in Canada. Everybody knows this guy. Wayne Gretzky, when asked, how are you so great? How did you get to be so great? How did you get to be the great one? He said, because I didn't skate to where the puck is, I skated to where it was going to be. So understanding that there is no real competition. You are your competition. The theme of this convention is crafting your brand. You have to learn how to develop and craft your own brand. We all, funeral homes, cemeteries, we all do the same thing, let's be honest. But how is your brand different? What do you do different? Are you high volume, low expense, and efficient? Or are you small and personal and provide individualized attention? Either one are fine. There's going to be business that needs to fit that niche. But understanding who you are, what's the vision of the company, and creating that brand. And remember, the competition is not the guy down the street, is not the gal across town. It's you. If you can learn how to take a vision of where I want this company to be in 5 and 10 years and make that your competition, I'm going to compete to make sure I meet or exceed those goals. And always remember that in order to have a high level of success, that you need the united team. You need to be able to bridge those gaps and bring people together from across the board. Every generation is going to have input, is going to have positive things to bring to the company, but sometimes you have to pull that out of people in order to craft that and be able to build it into your firm. And bridging those generational gaps is just the key way to do it. The things that I've brought toward you today are just ideas, but there's 1,001 different things you can do. You have to be intentional, and you have to be willing to make a change.